The OBSBOT Tail Air occupies a unique niche in the streaming market, pushing beyond the traditional webcam space into the domain covered by full production PTZ cameras. With its higher quality optics, pan-tilt capabilities, multiple connection options, and integrated AI features, the Tail Air defies any easy comparisons and needs to be evaluated on its own terms. With a compact design and the ability to operate fully standalone, the Tail Air offers a unique value proposition to the market. In this video, we'll take a detailed look at exactly what the Tail Air can do and how well it can do it. You may have seen an includes paid promotion label at the start of this video. We added that notice because OBSBOT did send us the Tail Air cameras we used to do this review. While we were not paid for making this video and OBSBOT had no control over its content or the opinions we've shared, we wanted to be completely transparent about our relationship with them. In this video, we'll take a comprehensive look at the Tail Air, starting with the camera hardware and looking at its sensors and optics. We'll then go over how to configure and control the Tail Air using OBSBOT's mobile-based Start App, look at the options you have to connect your Tail Air to your production software, and cover how to set up the advanced AI features of the Tail Air. We'll follow that with our thoughts on the Tail Air's strengths and limitations, share what we think are the optimal use cases for the camera, and wrap things up with our final thoughts on the Tail Air. There's a lot to cover, so let's get started. Let's get started by looking at the Tail Air device itself. The camera is very compact at just over 5 inches tall and weighing around 3/4 pounds. It also comes with a padded travel case, making it easy to pack and set up anywhere. On the back of the camera is a power button and a USB-C port. You'll need to press and hold the power button to turn the camera on or off. And this USB-C port below has multiple uses. It can be used to power the camera, connect the camera as a webcam, or to connect an Ethernet adapter to the camera. And when using the Ethernet adapter, the camera can be powered using Power over Ethernet. On the left side of the camera, we have a micro SD card slot and a micro HDMI port. The Tail Air can record up to 4K 30 video internally to a U3 rated card in this micro SD slot. And that card can also be used to store still images captured from the video stream. The micro HDMI port allows you to send up to 4K 30 video from the camera to an external monitor or video capture card. And it can be also used to play back video that was recorded on the micro SD card. On the right side of the Tail Air, we have a 3.5mm audio port. While the Tail Air does have two small built-in MEMS microphones, this tip ring sleeve port allows you to connect an external microphone or a line-level audio source. This audio will be captured in any recordings and will be embedded in both HDMI and NDI outputs, as well as streamed out to any destinations that you've configured. On the front of the camera, we have multiple indicator lights that show the status of various capabilities in the Tail Air. The top light bar lets you know if things like the AI tracking is on, the camera is recording, or if you're streaming. The 4 round LEDs below it indicate the charge level of the Tail Air's built-in battery. The Tail Air can run on this battery for around 2.5 hours, letting you live stream from any location using just your cell phone. Before we start looking at the optics and imaging in the Tail Air, we should touch on the pan, tilt, and zoom ranges that will let us frame the images we'll want to capture with it. The Tail Air can pan horizontally across a 300-degree range, 150 degrees in each direction from center. Vertically, it can tilt across a 97-degree range, 65 degrees upward and 32 degrees downward. And though there's no optical zoom in the camera, it does have a 4x virtual zoom. While this closer framing can be useful in some situations, it comes at the expense of your effective resolution. When fully zoomed in, the image you'll receive will be pulled from just the middle 960 by 540 pixels of the sensor. Now let's dig into the optics on the Tail Air camera, starting with the sensor. It's a 1/1/8 inch sensor, giving it a full frame equivalent crop factor of around 4.8. It has a raw resolution of 3856 by 2176 pixels, allowing it to capture up to a UHD 4K resolution image. This sensor sits behind a fixed 8-element lens system. The Tail Air can deliver a UHD 4K signal at frame rates as high as 30 frames per second. And for both 1080p and 720p, it can deliver frame rates up to 60 frames per second. The camera has a focal length of 4.8 millimeters with an aperture of f1.8, a full frame equivalent of a 23 millimeter focal length with an aperture of f8.6. The ISO range of the Tail Air goes from 100 to 6400, though higher settings will add a fair bit of noise to the image. So what type of quality can we get from the Tail Air's optics? The first video here is from a Sony FX30, our main studio camera. It's shooting at 4K with an effective 35mm f2.1 lens. And next to it is a video from the Tail Air shooting at 4K with no zoom. The effective 23mm f8.6 lens on the Tail Air gives it a much wider field of view and a deeper depth of field. When comparing the two, the Tail Air is a bit softer than the FX30, but both images are solid with good detail and accurate colors. Now if we compare that image from the Tail Air to one where the Tail Air has a 2x zoom, you can clearly see the loss in resolution. It's still a decent image with fairly accurate colors, but the details in the face and hair are definitely softer. So now let's look at how we work with the Tail Air. The Tail Air needs to be set up and controlled via an external application. Either the mobile OBSBOT Start App, which is available for both iOS and Android, or the OBSBOT Center app, available for both PC and Mac. All of these applications can be downloaded for free, and you'll need to install one of them before getting started. For this video, we'll be using the OBSBOT Start App running on an iPhone. Connecting the Start App to the Tail Air camera is fairly straightforward. First, just press and hold the power button on the Tail Air until the camera comes on. And next, launch the OBSBOT Start App. When you see your Tail Air camera appear, you can choose to use either Wi-Fi or a cellular connection for streaming, and then connect to it. With the Tail Air connected, let's go through the Start App interface. The button in the upper left corner lets you disconnect the camera and exit the app. The button below that is the Director's Grid, a screen that lets you select different preset framing options. You just need to touch the live thumbnail of the shot you want to switch to, and the Tail Air will smoothly transition to it. And the button below that is for camera settings. You can set your Tail Air to operate in either auto or manual mode. In auto mode, the sensor in the camera will automatically set the ISO, shutter speed, and exposure. In manual mode, you can set each of these directly. The focus control here lets you set it to continuous autofocus or spot focus, which locks in the focus at a fixed point that you touch on the screen. There are additional setting options across the bottom of the screen. There is a flip screen control, a grid control, and a high dynamic range control, and a lock exposure control, a control that you can use in auto mode to lock the exposure at its current setting even if lighting conditions change. The style control next to it acts like a basic proc amp with a few presets and custom controls. And finally, there's the white balance control to tell the sensor the color temperature of your lighting. So going back to the buttons along the left side, below the image settings button is a button that lets you play back any pre-recorded videos or display any photos. The bottom button along the left side is for all of the core settings of the Tail Air, and there are a few I'd like to touch on here. You can turn on specific gesture controls, something we'll get to when we cover the AI features of the Tail Air. You can turn on the internal microphones. You can turn on the UVC mode option when using the Tail Air as a webcam. You can also turn on IP-based outputs like NDI and SRT, though be aware that some of these modes can't be on at the same time. And finally, the media settings is where you configure the frame rate, resolution, bitrate, and encoding settings for your outputs, recordings, and streams. Now across the bottom of the control interface are buttons for framing the image you're capturing. They are broken into 3 groups. The first is for AI framing controls, which we'll be covering later. Next are the manual framing controls. The first button displays traditional PTZ controls. The joystick-style control on the left provides your pan and tilt controls, and the rocket-style control on the right is for zoom. You can set the responsiveness of these controls using the speed slider here. The next button lets you do virtual pans and zooms within the image that you framed with the previous controls. The portion of the video being fed out is highlighted by a red box. You can touch inside this box and drag your finger to a new location to frame, shown by a white bordered box. When you release your finger, the camera will make a smooth virtual pan to this new location. The next section over has the preset controls. The first button here lets you set the framing the camera defaults to when it first starts up. It'll bring up the pan, tilt, and zoom controls we saw previously. When you set this, clicking the check mark in the lower right will save it. The next button over saves the current framing as a new preset, and a new button will appear to let you recall it. The Tail Air can have up to 3 presets defined. You can press and hold any of these preset buttons to change or delete them. Now let's look at some of the ways you can connect the Tail Air camera into a production. The first method is to connect it via USB, basically letting your system see it as a webcam, albeit a very sophisticated one. The Tail Air should be recognized automatically when plugging into a Mac or PC. To use this camera in your application, select OBSBOT Tail Air Camera as the video device you want to connect with, and you should be set. The next connection method is via HDMI. To work with HDMI, you will need an HDMI capture device of some kind in your system. The HDMI port on the Tail Air is a micro HDMI, so you'll probably need a cable that connects from that to a standard HDMI jack. From there, you can access the Tail Air just like any other camera that you're working with. The last connection method I'll cover here is NDI, Network Device Interface. Using NDI, you can transmit video and audio from your Tail Air to any other device across a network connection. While the Tail Air natively supports NDI, you will need to purchase a separate license to activate it, as well as use a USB-C to RJ45 network adapter. When you switch on NDI mode in the OBSBOT Start App, your Tail Air's video and audio will be accessible across your entire network. The Tail Air can also send NDI signals over Wi-Fi, giving you completely untethered access to the camera. While I would always recommend using a wired connection when possible, it is definitely useful to have a wireless option available. One of the Tail Air's most powerful capabilities is its AI-based auto tracking. Double tapping on the control interface activates auto tracking mode. As you can see, the Tail Air follows me as I walk around the set. You can change the framing of the shot by tapping on the framing button. You can set it to full body, half body, close up, and auto select. You can also control the speed of the tracking. At fast tracking, the camera moves close to in sync with me. With standard, it lags a bit more, and with slow, even more than that. However you set it, all the tracking movements are smooth. The composition selection lets you control the headroom and center point of the track shot. Raising or lowering the horizontal bar adjusts the headroom. And sliding the vertical bar will bias the subject to the left or right of the frame. There's also an incredibly powerful option called face framing. When activated, if you look to the left, the shot is reframed to open more space to my left, and more to my right when I look to the right. Looking back at the Tail Air recenters the framing. In addition to tracking people, the Tail Air can also track objects. To do this, just tap the Object Tracking button and draw a box around the object you'd like to track. The Tail Air will then center the object in the frame and track it as you move it around. As you can see in this video, the Tail Air's object tracking is fairly accurate and does a good job keeping the tracked object in center frame. We found that if you didn't keep the same side of the object facing the camera as we moved it, the Tail Air could sometimes lose tracking. This also happened if we moved the object too quickly across the frame, or when there wasn't sufficient contrast between an object we were holding and the background that we moved it over. One of the truly unique features of the Tail Air is gesture control. And as the name implies, gesture control lets you control different camera actions using on-screen hand gestures. If you want to turn auto tracking on, instead of double tapping the screen, you could just hold up your hand like this. Doing it again will turn auto tracking off. If you want to do a quick close-up, you can hold your hand up like this. Doing it again will zoom back out. And if you want more control over framing, you can hold up both hands like this and move them closer together or further apart to adjust the zoom level. Finally, if you'd like to start recording your video to the Tail Air's micro SD card, just hold up your hand like this. Doing it again will stop recording. And to reduce the chance of triggering one of these actions inadvertently, each hand gesture needs to be held for a couple of seconds before its corresponding action will start. Based on everything we've seen from working with the Tail Air, there is a lot to like about the camera. It has solid image quality, it has good color rendering, and it also has excellent and accurate person tracking capabilities. The ability to use the Tail Air completely standalone with built-in tracking and recording is a great way to capture B-roll or do remote streams via a mobile phone. And all of that is made easier by its compact footprint. Finally, the Tail Air's support for USB, HDMI, and NDI connectivity make it a natural fit in any studio setting, from basic to professional. In our testing of the Tail Air, we also found a couple of things that we felt were a bit limiting. While you can get a quality image from the camera in most situations, it can become noisy in lower light. And while this isn't unexpected given the Tail Air's smaller sensor size, it is something to be aware of. Also, while clearly a technical design choice, the lack of any optical zoom in the Tail Air forces a trade-off between zoom level and resolution. This limits the placement of the Tail Air to locations where its shot can be correctly framed with just minimal use of zoom. We felt this was a missed opportunity. Finally, while people tracking worked exceptionally well, we needed to be careful setting up shots for object-based tracking to be sure they would work reliably. The solid image quality and excellent auto tracking of the Tail Air would make it a good fit for many production scenarios. It would be an excellent choice for any small live stream studio, giving solo streamers the ability to control their cameras via gestures and to leverage its excellent auto tracking to keep them in frame. It can also make an excellent behind-the-scenes camera, a popular style of video. The Tail Air can also work as a high-quality webcam, either for Zoom meetings or for remote guests that are calling into your productions. Given the Tail Air's compact size, built-in battery, and ability to live stream directly through a mobile phone, it would be an ideal camera for vloggers on location or streamers giving updates from conferences or events. It can also have a role in professional studios. The Tail Air's built-in SRT support would make it an excellent choice for small insert studios, and its built-in support for NDI would let it easily integrate into IP-based production workflows. With the Tail Air, OBSBOT has really packed a lot of capabilities into an extremely portable camera. It's solidly built, delivers a quality image, and has impressive AI-powered auto tracking and gesture control. And the ability to use them standalone and completely untethered opens up a new range of production possibilities. At the time of this video, the Tail Air has a list price in the US of $499. And we feel that this price is definitely in line with the quality and capabilities that the Tail Air offers. If your use case has the flexibility to place these cameras where they can correctly frame your subjects without needing any significant zoom, we would definitely recommend looking more closely at the Tail Air. We came away very impressed. Thank you so much for watching. If you have the chance, we'd love you to check out more of our content here. And if you enjoyed this video, please consider sharing and subscribing. It really helps the channel. I'll see you next time.